Dr. Michael Carter had seen countless patients walk through the doors of Oak Ridge General Hospital, but nothing had prepared him for what happened that cold autumn evening. It started like any other shift: rounds, paperwork, and the usual stream of patients with flu symptoms, minor injuries, and the occasional emergency. The hospital had a steady rhythm, predictable in its own way. But that night, the rhythm would break. That night, everything would change. The ER doors slid open, and a young woman stepped inside. At first glance, Dr. Carter thought she was a child, 10, maybe 11 years old. She was petite, barely reaching 5 feet, with delicate features and large, expressive eyes that darted around the waiting room, nervous and uncertain. She clutched a small bag against her chest, her hands trembling slightly as she stepped toward the front desk. Nurse Julia, who had worked at Oak Ridge for over 15 years, was the first to interact with her. "Sweetheart, are you lost?" she asked kindly, leaning over the desk to meet the young girl's eyes. The girl shook her head, swallowing hard. I have an appointment," she said, her voice soft but steady. Julia frowned, glancing at the clipboard in front of her. "Your name, honey?" "Ava. Ava Thompson." Dr. Carter, who had been finishing up a patient file at the station, barely looked up at first. But then he heard Julia's sharp intake of breath, and something in her expression changed. His gaze snapped toward the young girl. Ava Thompson. The name was familiar, but he couldn't immediately place it. Julia quickly scanned the file, her fingers tightening on the clipboard. She hesitated, then looked up again. "Ava, you're here for a prenatal checkup?" Silence. A thick, heavy silence that seemed to settle over the room like a dense fog. Dr. Carter's pen slipped from his hand. Julia's face paled. A couple of nurses behind her exchanged glances. A murmur of disbelief spread through the station. Ava nodded. "Yes. I'm 6 months pregnant." No one spoke. Even the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed to dim under the weight of those words. Dr. Carter finally found his voice. "Ava, would you mind stepping into an exam room with me?" She hesitated but nodded, following him down the hall. Inside the private exam room, she perched nervously on the edge of the paper-covered bed. Dr. Carter pulled up a chair and sat across from her, his medical instincts kicking in, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Ava," he began gently, "I have to ask, how old are you?" She lifted her chin slightly. "I'm 24. The words didn't immediately register. He studied her closely, searching for any sign of deception, but all he saw was sincerity. "You're 24, he repeated. She nodded again. "I know I don't look it. I have a condition. A rare one." Dr. Carter had seen cases of stunted growth before, but nothing quite like this. Ava had the face, the frame, and the voice of a child. It wasn't just a matter of being petite, there was something almost surreal about it. Taking a steadying breath, he shifted gears. "And your pregnancy, have you had any complications?" Ava hesitated. "I haven't seen a doctor since I found out." Dr. Carter frowned. "That was 6 months ago." She nodded. "Ava, why haven't you been seen sooner?" She bit her lip. "Because no one believes me," she admitted finally. "Every time I try to explain, people treat me like a kid. They either dismiss me or call the police. I was scared." Dr. Carter exhaled slowly, running a hand down his face. This was serious. A 6-month pregnancy with no prenatal care was risky, regardless of the circumstances. And if she truly had a rare condition affecting her growth, there could be complications no one had anticipated. "All right," he said, keeping his voice even. "We'll start with an ultrasound. Make sure everything looks good." Ava nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. A nurse wheeled in the machine, setting everything up. Dr. Carter applied the cool gel to Ava's stomach, and the room fell silent as the screen flickered to life. Then, something strange happened. Dr. Carter frowned, adjusting the probe. His eyes narrowed. He moved the probe again. His heartbeat quickened. This wasn't normal. Ava watched him, her hands gripping the edge of the bed. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. He was too focused on the screen, on the thing he was seeing. It didn't make sense. "Ava." He swallowed hard. "Has anyone ever told you that you might have an anomaly beyond just stunted growth?" She blinked. "No." "Why?" Dr. Carter's mind raced. He had seen thousands of ultrasounds in his career, but never anything like this. The baby was there, healthy, but something else was too. Something that shouldn't be there. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the phone on the counter. His pulse thundered in his ears as he dialed. 911, what's your emergency? Dr. Carter took a breath. This is Dr. Carter at Oak Ridge General. I need immediate assistance. We have a patient with a highly unusual case that requires urgent medical and investigative attention. Ava's eyes widened. What? Why are you calling them? He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Ava, he said carefully, I think there's something you don't know about yourself. And I think someone else might already know. She froze. What do you mean? Dr. Carter's grip tightened on the ultrasound probe. He didn't know how to say it. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a medical case anymore. This was something bigger. Something that went beyond just a rare condition or an unusual pregnancy. And whatever it was about to change everything. The tension in the room thickened as Ava's breathing became shallow. Her fingers dug into the thin paper sheet covering the exam table, her knuckles turning white. Dr. Carter could see the fear creeping into her eyes, the uncertainty gnawing at the edges of her already fragile composure. He had just placed the call to 911, but even as he waited for their response, a gnawing sense of unease settled deep in his chest. He had never made a call like this before, not because of a medical emergency, but because something about this case felt wrong in ways he couldn't explain. Ava's lips trembled as she forced herself to speak. Doctor, tell me. What did you see? Dr. Carter hesitated. He wasn't even sure how to explain it. On the ultrasound screen, Ava's baby appeared normal, moving gently within the womb, but there was something else. Something faint but unmistakable. A shadow. A second mass, barely perceptible, but not a twin. He had delivered hundreds of babies before, and this didn't resemble any known pregnancy complication. It wasn't a tumor. It wasn't an anomaly he had ever seen. It was something different. And the way it seemed to move independently from the fetus sent ice down his spine. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the receiver. 911, what's the nature of your emergency? Dr. Carter swallowed, his fingers tightening around the phone. I need immediate law enforcement presence at Oak Ridge General. I have a patient with a highly unusual medical case, and I believe there may be external concerns regarding her safety. The dispatcher hesitated. Can you clarify what kind of concerns? He glanced at Ava, her wide, terrified eyes searching his face for answers. How could he explain it over the phone? The feeling that something about this wasn't just medical, but deliberate? That Ava herself might not even know what was happening inside her. We may be dealing with a case of medical fraud, identity misrepresentation, or something more complicated, he said carefully. I need officers here as soon as possible. There was another pause, then, understood. Units are en route. The line went dead. Dr. Carter placed the phone down, turning back to Ava. I need you to tell me everything, he said, his voice low but firm. Who have you been living with? Who knows about your pregnancy? Has anyone ever taken an unusual interest in you? Ava looked bewildered, shaking her head rapidly. I've been alone for most of my life. My parents died when I was a teenager. I've always been small, so people assume I'm a child. It makes it hard to find work, to be taken seriously. Her voice cracked. But I never lied about who I am. Dr. Carter leaned forward. And the father of the baby? Where is he? Ava's body stiffened. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. I don't know, she whispered. Something about the way she said it made the hairs on Dr. Carter's arm stand up. You don't know? Ava shook her head again, more forcefully this time. I don't remember. One day, I just knew I was pregnant. I never had a boyfriend. She squeezed her eyes shut, her breath coming in rapid bursts. I didn't do anything that should have made this possible. Dr. Carter felt his stomach tighten. A pregnancy without recollection of conception? It wasn't possible. Unless. A loud bang at the ER entrance made both of them jump. Dr. Carter's head snapped toward the door. That wasn't the sound of regular foot traffic. It sounded deliberate. Urgent. Ava flinched. Who's that? Dr. Carter reached for the intercom, pressing the button that connected him to the front desk. Julia? What's going on out there? Static crackled for a moment before Julia's voice came through, hushed and frantic. Doctor, there are 2 men here. They're not police. They're saying they need to take Ava with them immediately. Cold dread settled in his gut. Did they say who they were? They won't show ID, Julia hissed. They're wearing suits. Government-type suits. Dr. Carter's mind raced. Who would know Ava was here? He had just placed the call to 911 minutes ago. There was no way the police had alerted anyone this quickly. The only people who should have known were him, his medical staff, and Ava herself. Unless someone was already watching her. He turned back to Ava. Ava, listen to me carefully. Have you ever been contacted by any government agency? Anyone who seemed unusually interested in your medical history? She shook her head wildly, her breathing uneven. No. Never. I don't understand, why would anyone be interested in me? Dr. Carter had a terrifying suspicion. He moved quickly to the ultrasound machine, snapping a few images onto a flash drive before yanking it out and shoving it into his pocket. Ava, we need to move. Now. Ava's eyes widened. What? Why? Another bang, this time on the ER's inside doors. Someone was trying to force their way in. Dr. Carter grabbed Ava's wrist, pulling her off the exam table. Because I don't think you're just an unusual medical case, he said grimly. I think you're part of something much bigger. He barely had time to finish the sentence before the door burst open. 2 men in black suits stormed inside, their movements precise, controlled. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a clean-shaven face, locked eyes with Dr. Carter. Ava Thompson needs to come with us, the man said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Dr. Carter stepped protectively in front of Ava. Under whose authority? The man didn't blink. Classified. No, Ava whimpered. No, I'm not going anywhere with you. Dr. Carter's pulse pounded. He had no weapons, no way to fight. But he wasn't letting them take her. Not without answers. The second man reached into his jacket, for what? A badge? A weapon? Dr. Carter didn't wait to find out. He grabbed a metal tray from the counter and hurled it at the overhead light, shattering the bulbs in a burst of sparks. The room plunged into flickering darkness. Run, he shouted, shoving Ava toward the back door. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second before bolting. Dr. Carter followed, his heart hammering. Behind them, the men cursed, stumbling over equipment in the sudden darkness. Ava and Dr. Carter burst into the emergency stairwell, slamming the door behind them. "Where are we going?" Ava panted, gripping the railing as they descended. "I don't know yet," Dr. Carter admitted. "But we need to disappear, before they find us first." Dr. Carter's pulse pounded in his ears as he and Ava raced down the emergency stairwell, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. He had never done anything like this before, never defied unknown men in suits, never risked his medical career, never thrown himself into a situation he barely understood. But something deep in his gut told him that Ava was in grave danger, and he couldn't just hand her over. Not until he knew why. Ava's breathing was ragged, her small frame trembling as she clung to the stair railing. "Where are we going?" she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter kept moving, his mind working fast. "We need to get out of the hospital without being seen. Those men weren't cops, and they weren't doctors. That means whatever's happening to you isn't just a medical issue, it's something bigger." Ava's eyes darted back toward the stairwell entrance. "But why me? I don't even know what's happening to me. Why would anyone?" Before she could finish, the door above them slammed open with a bang, and heavy footsteps thundered down after them. Dr. Carter cursed under his breath. They were coming. He grabbed Ava's hand and pulled her down faster. "Move, now." They reached the bottom of the stairwell, but their escape route had one major flaw: the exit door led straight to the ambulance bay, a well-lit area filled with security cameras and personnel. They couldn't go that way. Thinking fast, Dr. Carter veered left, leading Ava through a rusted maintenance door that he knew hadn't been locked in years. It swung open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with storage closets and old hospital equipment. "In here," he whispered, pulling Ava inside one of the darkened supply rooms. The space smelled of antiseptic and cardboard, the shelves stacked with unused equipment. He pressed Ava against the wall, putting a finger to his lips. Seconds later, the sound of boots on tile approached the maintenance hall. Ava's whole body was trembling, her breathing shallow. Dr. Carter could feel her fear. He held his breath. The boots stopped right outside their door. A long silence. Then, a click. Dr. Carter barely had time to react before the door was yanked open. Light flooded in, and he was face to face with one of the suited men. For a split second, no one moved. The man's eyes locked onto Ava. "There you are," he said, reaching inside his jacket. Dr. Carter's instincts took over. Before the man could pull out whatever was in his jacket, a weapon? A syringe, Dr. Carter lunged. He slammed his full weight into the agent, sending them both crashing into a metal shelving unit. The agent grunted, struggling to regain his balance, but Carter didn't give him the chance. He grabbed the closest thing he could find, a metal clipboard, and swung it hard, smacking the agent across the head. Ava let out a small scream as the agent stumbled, dazed. "Go!" Dr. Carter shouted. Ava bolted past him, sprinting down the hall. Dr. Carter turned to follow, but the agent recovered fast. A strong hand latched onto Carter's wrist, yanking him backward. The man was trained, stronger than he looked, and he moved with lethal precision. In an instant, he twisted Carter's arm behind his back, pinning him against the wall. "You don't know what you're doing," the agent growled into his ear. Dr. Carter gritted his teeth, struggling. "Neither do you." With all his strength, he kicked back, hitting the agent's knee. The grip loosened just enough for him to break free. He didn't hesitate, he ran. He sprinted down the hall, turning corners blindly, his mind only on one thing: finding Ava. She was ahead of him, pushing through an old service door that led into the hospital basement. Carter caught up just as she shoved it closed behind her. They were in a dark, abandoned storage area. Old equipment covered in plastic sheets, flickering emergency lights, exposed pipes running along the ceiling. Ava backed away, terrified. Dr. Carter knelt beside her, trying to catch his breath. "Are you okay?" Ava nodded, but her eyes were wide with panic. "Who are they? What do they want with me?" Dr. Carter shook his head. "I don't know. But if they're going to these lengths to take you, it means one thing." He paused. "You're important." Ava hugged herself, shaking. "But why?" I'm just me." Dr. Carter hesitated. He thought back to the ultrasound. That shadow. That thing inside her. It wasn't a normal fetus. It wasn't a normal pregnancy. Something else was happening to Ava. And whatever it was, those men knew about it. Before he could respond, the sound of voices echoed down the stairwell. "They're still in the building," someone said. Ava's breathing hitched. Dr. Carter looked around, desperate for an escape route. Then, he saw it. A narrow tunnel, barely big enough to crawl through, leading into the old steam tunnels beneath the hospital. It wasn't safe. It was dangerous, dark, filled with old pipes and possible flooding. But it was their only way out. He turned to Ava. "I need you to trust me." Ava hesitated, but then, slowly, she nodded. Dr. Carter took a deep breath, then led her toward the tunnel. Behind them, the footsteps grew louder. The men were closing in. Carter lifted the metal grate covering the tunnel. Rust flaked off in his hands. He motioned for Ava to go first. She hesitated, then crawled inside. Dr. Carter followed, pulling the grate back over them just as the agents entered the basement. They pressed their bodies against the cold metal, staying completely still. Through the small gaps in the grate, Carter could see the men searching the basement. His heart hammered. One of the men turned, his dark eyes scanning the room. For a moment, Carter thought the agent had seen them. Then, another voice called from the hallway. "Nothing here. They must have slipped out." The man hesitated, then turned and left. The footsteps faded. Silence. Dr. Carter let out a slow breath. Then, carefully, he started crawling forward into the dark, pulling Ava with him. They had escaped, this time. But something told him this was just the beginning. Dr. Carter's breathing was ragged as he crawled through the tight steam tunnel, his elbows scraping against the cold metal, his body pressed against damp pipes that ran alongside him. The stale air smelled of rust and mildew, making each breath thick and heavy. Ahead of him, Ava moved carefully, her small frame barely making a sound. He could hear her shallow, panicked breaths, could feel the tension in the way she hesitated before each inch forward. "Just keep going," he whispered, trying to keep his own voice calm, though his heart was hammering in his chest. He had no idea how long this tunnel stretched, but it was their only way out. Behind them, the basement was now silent, but silence didn't mean safety. Those men were trained, organized. If they wanted Ava, they wouldn't just give up because they lost sight of her for a few minutes. They would be watching, waiting. And Carter knew hospitals. Every exit, every hallway, every security feed, they would have eyes on them the moment they emerged from hiding. Ava's voice trembled. "Where does this lead?" "Maintenance access," Carter whispered back. "It should take us outside the hospital walls. But we have to be careful. If we come out in the wrong place." A sudden clank echoed in the tunnel. Ava gasped, freezing in place. Dr. Carter snapped his head back, heart racing. The sound hadn't come from them. Someone else was in the tunnel. He swallowed hard, straining his ears. Then, another noise. Closer. Metal groaning. Footsteps. Someone was following them. Dr. Carter reached forward, gripping Ava's wrist. Move. Now. Ava didn't hesitate this time. She crawled faster, pushing through the narrow passage, her breath quickening. Carter followed, adrenaline surging through him. The tunnel was dark, damp, claustrophobic. His palms were slick with sweat, but he forced himself forward, his muscles screaming from the awkward movement. Another clang behind them. Closer. Whoever was back there, they were gaining. Carter's pulse pounded in his ears. The exit had to be close. Ava yelped ahead of him, stopping abruptly. What? Carter hissed. Ava's voice was panicked. There's a drop. I can't see the bottom. Carter swore under his breath. He pushed forward, nearly colliding with her. The tunnel did drop, at least 6 feet down into darkness. He peered below, trying to make out the landing. His brain worked fast. If they hesitated any longer, whoever was behind them would catch up. He made a choice. Jump, he said. Ava turned, wide-eyed. What? Carter didn't wait. He shifted forward and dropped down first, his feet hitting the concrete with a thud. The impact shot up his legs, but he gritted his teeth and straightened, looking up at Ava. Come on, he whispered urgently. Ava's breath hitched, but then she slid forward and let herself drop. Carter caught her as best as he could, breaking her fall just enough to keep her from getting hurt. She stumbled, but he held her steady. No time to rest. Above them, movement in the tunnel. A faint beam of light flickered, someone had a flashlight. Dr. Carter grabbed Ava's hand and pulled her forward. The tunnel widened into a small chamber, pipes lining the walls, a rusted old ladder leading up to what looked like an access hatch. Carter didn't think. He pushed Ava toward the ladder. Climb, he ordered. Ava scrambled up, gripping the metal rungs, her feet slipping slightly on the rusted edges. Carter followed close behind, keeping an eye on the tunnel entrance. Then, the sound of movement. They were inside now. Carter forced himself up the ladder faster, muscles burning. Ava reached the top, pressing her hands against the hatch. It didn't budge. It's locked, she whispered, panic in her voice. Carter swore under his breath. He reached her just as a voice echoed from below. Don't move. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Carter turned his head slightly, peering down. A man was standing at the bottom of the ladder, looking straight at them. He wasn't dressed like the others. No black suit. No earpiece. He wore hospital scrubs, but his stance was wrong. Too rigid. Too controlled. And in his hand, a gun. Carter's stomach twisted. I said don't move, the man repeated, his voice even. Carter slowly positioned himself in front of Ava, shielding her. The man didn't raise the gun, yet. But his grip was steady. I don't want to hurt you, the man continued. But you have to come with me. Now. Carter's mind raced. This man wasn't just a doctor. He had training. His stance, his movements, it all screamed military. Ava shook behind him, her fingers digging into Carter's shoulder. He needed a way out. Fast. Then, he saw it. A small access valve behind the man. A gas line. A desperate idea formed in Carter's mind. He exhaled slowly. Okay, he said, raising his hand slightly. The man nodded. Step down. Carter moved slowly, 1 foot lower. Just enough to shift his weight. Then, he struck. In one sudden movement, Carter kicked out, hitting the nearest pipe with full force. A sharp hiss erupted as the gas line ruptured, releasing a cloud of pressurized vapor. The man cursed, stumbling back, momentarily blinded. Carter didn't hesitate, he turned, grabbed Ava, and slammed his shoulder into the hatch. Metal groaned. The lock held. Below, coughing, movement, fast footsteps. Carter slammed into the hatch again. The metal bent slightly. The man below was recovering fast. One more hit. Carter threw his full weight into the hatch. With a final crack, the lock snapped, and the hatch burst open. Fresh night air flooded in. They were outside. Carter pulled Ava up, shoving her through the opening. Then, he climbed out, turning just as the man reached the top of the ladder. For a moment, they locked eyes. Then, Carter grabbed the hatch and slammed it closed. Ava gasped beside him, shaking. Carter spun around, taking in their surroundings. They were in the hospital's back lot, near the incinerator facility. It was late. The sky was dark, only a few streetlights casting dim light over the empty pavement. Ava clung to him, trembling. Carter gritted his teeth. They had escaped, for now. But the hospital was compromised. They couldn't stay here. Ava was still in danger. And the only thing he knew for certain. Whoever these people were, they wouldn't stop coming. Dr. Carter gripped Ava's trembling hand as they darted across the dimly lit back lot, his heart pounding with the weight of what had just happened. The night air was cool against his sweat-drenched skin, but his mind burned with questions. Who were these people? What did they want with Ava? And most importantly, how far would they go to get her? He scanned the surroundings, searching for cover. The hospital's incinerator building loomed to their right, a squat, windowless structure with thick metal doors. Beyond it, a chain-link fence stretched along the perimeter, topped with coiled razor wire. There were only two options: try to climb and risk getting caught in the open, or find another way out. Ava's breathing was shallow, her small frame shaking beside him. "Where do we go?" she whispered, voice raw with fear. Carter squeezed her hand tighter. "Away from here. Fast." Just then, the hospital's back doors burst open with a metallic clang. Carter yanked Ava behind a rusted dumpster, pressing her against the cold metal as voices filled the air. "Find them." A man's sharp command sliced through the quiet night. They couldn't have gone far. Boots scuffed against the pavement. Flashlights flickered, beams slicing through the darkness. Carter held his breath, willing his pulse to slow. Ava trembled in his grip, her small fingers clutching the fabric of his sleeve like a lifeline. If they were caught, there would be no talking their way out of this. These weren't hospital security guards. They were something else. A shadow passed by, just inches from their hiding spot. The man carried a gun, his grip tight, his posture rigid. Trained. Professional. Carter's mind raced. They needed a distraction, something to shift attention away from their escape. Then, a thought. He leaned in, whispering so quietly Ava could barely hear. "When I say run, you sprint for that fence. Don't stop, don't look back." Her eyes widened. "But." "No buts. Trust me." She swallowed hard and nodded. Carter inched his foot forward, feeling for the edge of a loose brick near the dumpster's base. He nudged it free, gripping it in his hand. Another guard passed, scanning the area. The moment his back turned, Carter hurled the brick toward the incinerator's metal door. The crash echoed through the lot like a gunshot. Over there, one of the men barked. Instantly, flashlights swiveled, boots thundered toward the sound. Carter didn't hesitate. "Run." Ava bolted, her small figure disappearing into the night. Carter followed, every muscle screaming for speed. The fence was just ahead. He could hear the men behind them, shouts, footsteps pounding on asphalt. Ava reached the fence first. She hesitated only a second before scrambling up, fingers clutching the chain links as she climbed. Carter followed, gripping the rough metal, ignoring the sting as the lynx bit into his palms. A gunshot cracked the air. Ava screamed. Carter's heart stopped. Not from pain. Not from fear. But because he knew what that sound meant. They were done playing. They were shooting to kill. He grabbed Ava's waist, hoisting her over the top as another shot rang out. Ava landed with a thud on the other side, gasping, rolling to her feet. Carter climbed faster, every nerve screaming. A third gunshot, too close. Something hot and sharp sliced across his shoulder. Pain exploded, but he didn't stop. He flung himself over the top, landing hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Ava grabbed his wrist. "You're bleeding." Carter barely registered the pain. The men were reaching the fence, flashlights bouncing wildly. They had seconds. "Go," he rasped. They ran. They tore through the empty streets, darting between parked cars, past shuttered shops. Carter's pulse pounded in his ears, his vision blurring slightly from the wound in his shoulder. He could feel the warm stickiness of blood seeping through his shirt, but adrenaline kept him moving. Only when they reached a deserted alley did they finally stop. Carter pressed his back against a brick wall, panting, chest heaving. Ava stood beside him, clutching her own arms, eyes wide, panicked. Silence. No voices. No footsteps. They'd lost them. For now. Carter swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus through the haze of pain. He needed to think. Ava's voice trembled. "What do we do now?" Carter exhaled, forcing down the rising nausea. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look." Ava looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she reached into her pocket. And pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Carter frowned. "What's that?" She hesitated before unfolding it. A name. An address. Carter's pulse spiked. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Ava's voice was barely a whisper. "My mother gave it to me. Before she died. She told me, if I was ever in trouble, to find this person." Carter studied the name, the address. It was across town. A place neither of them had ever been. Ava swallowed hard. "Dr. Carter. I think my mother knew this would happen." A cold chill crept down Carter's spine. Nothing about this night had made sense. Not the men in suits. Not the secrecy. Not the way Ava had been hidden in that hospital. And now, this. A mysterious address. A final clue from Ava's mother. Something much bigger was at play. And Carter had a sinking feeling that they were only just beginning to understand the truth. Carter knew they couldn't stay in the alley much longer. His shoulder throbbed, the pain pulsing with each beat of his heart, but it didn't matter. Ava was looking at him with those wide, uncertain eyes, waiting for him to decide what to do next. The address she had given him burned in his mind. Who was this person? Why had Ava's mother given it to her? More importantly, why had she known Ava would need it? He pushed himself off the brick wall, wincing as a fresh wave of pain tore through his body. "We have to move," he said. "Now." Ava hesitated but nodded. She tucked the piece of paper back into her pocket, her small hands shaking. Carter scanned the street. The city had settled into its eerie late-night stillness, cars abandoned on the roadside, neon signs flickering in and out of life. The hospital was far behind them now, but he knew they weren't safe. Those men, whoever they were, wouldn't just give up. Carter pulled his phone from his pocket, grimacing when he saw the cracked screen and the zero signal bars. They had to go on foot. He forced his legs to move, each step slow and careful. He could feel his strength draining, but he clenched his jaw, forcing himself forward. Ava stayed close beside him, her eyes darting nervously at every passing shadow. What if they find us? She whispered. They won't. He wasn't sure if that was a promise or a desperate hope. It took nearly an hour to reach the address on the paper. The deeper they went into the city, the more rundown the streets became. Streetlights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. Most of the buildings were abandoned or boarded up. The house Ava's mother had written down sat at the end of a narrow street, an old, two-story structure with peeling paint and overgrown bushes. Carter hesitated. This was it. But something felt wrong. Ava clutched his sleeve. Should we knock? He exhaled. There was no other choice. He stepped onto the porch, feeling the wood creak under his weight, and knocked, once, twice. Silence. He knocked again, harder. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The door creaked open just a fraction, revealing the shadowed outline of a person. Carter barely had time to register the movement before a hand shot out, yanking them both inside. The door slammed shut. Carter spun, his fists clenched, preparing for an attack. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he froze. The woman standing before them was older, maybe in her late 50s, with sharp eyes that immediately locked onto Ava. Her breath hitched. You, she whispered. Ava flinched. Do you know me? The woman exhaled shakily and stepped forward, her hand reaching out, but then she hesitated. I knew your mother, she said carefully. But I didn't think you'd ever come here. Carter tensed. What did that mean? Ava swallowed. She gave me this address before she died. The woman's expression darkened. Then she knew. She looked up at Carter, her eyes narrowing slightly. Who are you? Dr. Carter, he said. I work at. I know who you are, she interrupted. You're the one who got involved. Carter frowned. Involved in what? The woman's gaze flickered between them, and she sighed. Come with me. She led them down a hallway, past dusty furniture and shelves stacked with old books. The house smelled like aged wood and something faintly medicinal. Carter's nerves were on edge, but he followed, keeping Ava close. The woman stopped in front of a locked cabinet. She pulled a key from around her neck and unlocked it, revealing stacks of files, documents, photos. She pulled out a thick manila folder and handed it to Carter. Read, she said. Carter hesitated, then opened it. The first thing he saw was a photo of Ava's mother. Young, smiling. But as he flipped through the pages, his breath caught. Medical reports. Lab results. Government documents. Ava shifted beside him. What is all this? The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. The truth about you, Ava. Carter's stomach twisted. The reports detailed genetic testing, experimental treatments, classified research. Some of the documents had government seals, others had names redacted. But one thing became clear as he pieced it together. Ava wasn't just small. She had been made this way. They experimented on your mother, the woman said softly. She was part of a secret program, one she never agreed to. When she got pregnant, they tried to take you. She escaped. Carter's breath stalled. That's why they were after her. The woman nodded grimly. They lost track of her for years. But now they've found you. Ava's face had gone pale. What do they want? The woman exhaled slowly. To finish what they started. Carter slammed the folder shut. His pulse roared in his ears. Ava wasn't just some rare medical case, she was the result of something dark, hidden, dangerous. And those men? They weren't just looking for her. They wanted to take her back. Ava trembled. What do we do? The woman's eyes were grim. You run. And you never stop. Carter's jaw clenched. That's not good enough. We need to stop them. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. There's a way, she admitted. But it's dangerous. Carter's lips curled into a bitter smirk. I think we're past the point of playing it safe. Ava's fingers curled around his hand. And deep down, Carter knew. This wasn't over.